Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome to your Linux and open source news recap. This week we have more details about the ongoing work to support color profiles and HDR on Linux. We have Ubuntu securing their personal package archives, also known as PPAs, and we also have an unfortunate security breach for KeePass, the password manager. On top of that, Cinnamon is seeing more adoption, and there's a new desktop based on XFCE and a lot of other news, including some from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare. They offer a range of services to ensure your Linux server and workstation fleet stay up to date, secure, and supported, with kernel life patching, extended support for end-of-life distributions, and commercial support for AlmaLinux. And if this range of services is something that interests you and you want to be kept up to date, then you can subscribe to their newsletter. They will only send you email twice a month, so you won't get spammed. And they offer news and insights about cybersecurity, vulnerability management, Linux, and open source news. So if you want to be kept in the loop about all of this, click the link in the description below and subscribe to TuxCare's newsletter. So this week we got more details about the future HDR and color profile support on Linux, notably on Kwin. Xavier Hugel explained the old approach for handling this, which is basically setting a color profile for the display that then get generously ignored by most applications, which then look pretty wrong and exhibit color bending because it only supports 8-bit per color channel. And that's for X11. With Wayland, there is no current API to do that, and that's what developers are working on implementing. They want to let applications tag their content with a color space and some metadata, and the compositor, in this case Kwin, but in GNOME that would be Mutter, would be in charge of doing the various conversions to make sure the colors look right on the display by using your GPU. And you might as well use that thing for everything it can do, because it basically costs the price that your parents paid for their first house. And apps that wouldn't do this tagging would still look right, as it would be assumed that they use sRGB, and so the required color conversions would be done automatically for them. This would make sure that every app has the right colors and that high dynamic range is supported fully. The Wayland protocol for this is under heavy development and not ready. But during the recent HDR-focused Hackfest, a few hacks were implemented that already allow for some pseudo-HDR content to be played next to the desktop interface using SDR. The latest release of Kwin for the early Plasma 6 builds can already support this by enabling a few features for which a graphical user interface will be coming later. Of course, they can't yet say when this API will be ready, but still, it seems to be moving quite fast, and it's really exciting because these are very important features. Now, it looks like Ubuntu is going to make some changes to the good old PPA system. PPAs were introduced a long time ago as an easy-to-host and easy-to-add repo for developers who wanted to distribute their apps without having to wait the months or sometimes the years it took to add them to the official Ubuntu repos. With Ubuntu 23.10, they will improve the security of these repositories. Instead of adding them as a .list file stored in your etc apt sources.list.d folder, they'll be added as .sources files, which have their GPG keys embedded into the file itself, instead of being managed separately. This means that, first, removing a PPA will remove its key automatically, which is better. Second, keys are unique to each PPA and can't be reused for other ones, which also improves security. And other keys that didn't come with the PPA cannot be used to sign it. In short, PPAs will be more secure and will throw less errors about a key being invalid or missing. In practice, you should not see any concrete changes when adding or removing PPAs as a user, other than knowing that they're a bit safer. And of course, PPAs are still third-party repositories, so you should only add them if you absolutely trust the maintainer to only upload what they say they upload. Now, KeePass, the open source password manager, suffers from a security flaw that can be exploited to recover the master password, and thus access all passwords stored in it. This vulnerability is unfixed as of yet, and an exploit using it is publicly available, although it cannot be used remotely on its own, so someone would need to have physical access to your computer or to have something installed on your PC that lets them run the exploit and grab your passwords. At which point you undoubtedly have other issues to worry about than just your password manager, for example a keylogger, unless you use Wayland, because that can't work on Wayland. The issue affects the text box where you type your master password to unlock your password manager, in which apparently a string is left in memory for each character you type, which means someone who can access a dump from the KeePass process can deduce the password from the leftover patterns. It doesn't immediately get full clear text access to the password, it needs to infer it, but it's still pretty bad. The vulnerability affects KeePass any version above 2.0 on Windows and possibly on macOS and Linux as well. It's fixed in a beta version that's expected to be released before July. Still, no need to panic. This exploit needs physical access to your computer or some kind of malware developed specifically to gather these dumps and then try to access your password manager. So it's not the end of the world, but it's still pretty bad. Now, if at some point you've been looking for an alternative to CentOS Stream, you probably know about AlmaLinux and Rocky Linux, the two main replacements for it. They both just got their update to version 9.2 to match Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which they are one-to-one binary compatible with. And they got plenty of package updates, support for WireGuard VPNs, even with SE Linux enabled, and they still run GNOME 40 with Wayland by default. But what's more interesting is that Cinnamon will now be shipped in an official AlmaLinux ISO. Because yes, these distributions aren't just for servers, they also work perfectly well on workstations. After users suggested to include a Cinnamon edition on the distro's Reddit channel of all things, the AlmaLinux community decided to agree to build a Cinnamon ISO. It was already doable by adding an EPEL repo that contained Cinnamon, but this will make things a lot easier for everyone, and it also means that this ISO will very likely be tested, and that Cinnamon will be well integrated, something that is always better than using a third-party repo. So Cinnamon will join XFCE, KDE, and GNOME as official AlmaLinux flavors. And it's really cool to see Cinnamon being used on more and more distributions. It's a fantastic desktop environment, and it being confined to Mint doesn't do it full justice. Now, still on the topic of Linux distros, you might have heard of Rhino Linux. It's a rolling release based on Ubuntu that brings a new packaging tool to let you install, remove, and update various packages, like debs, flatpaks, and snaps all in one. Rhino Linux got a new beta for their first stable version, and this introduced their own desktop called Unicorn. And I wanted to make a joke about being horny here, but it felt inappropriate. So Unicorn is based on XFCE 4.18, but modifies it heavily to be more user-friendly out of the box, and to look a bit nicer as well, at least if you like a lilac accent color on a dark mode. Unicorn brings ULauncher out of the box, which is basically like macOS's Spotlight, and it adds an app grid instead of a menu, very reminiscent of the one GNOME uses, called Lightpad. It's compatible with Wayland, and, well, it looks like an app grid. They also added XF Dashboard, which is basically like the GNOME Activities view or the KDE Overview, with virtual desktops and windows displayed in an expose mode. All of these tools are accessible using keyboard shortcuts like Super+A for the app grid, Super+S for the search bar, and Super+D for the dashboard. And it looks interesting, but at that point, why not just use GNOME plus ULauncher? It already does everything you want it to, and honestly, once you tack all these add-ons on top of XFCE, I doubt that it will be lightweight, or at least more lightweight than GNOME. Now, after a few less active weeks, the GNOME development community released some big things. First, the GNOME settings will be getting a few changes. They added a new information button widget to explain certain settings to users, in the form of a little eye icon. And it's been added to the users panel to explain auto login or administrator status. The sharing panel also got some descriptions for each sharing option. GNOME software also saw some changes to the pop-up that appears when uninstalling an app, to either let you know that all the app data will be kept for apps installed using regular old packages, or to let you either keep or delete that app data when uninstalling a Flatpak. What's that? You get more features and controls with Flatpak? What a terrible packaging format! In terms of applications, GNOME Document Scanner is now fully ported to GTK4 and libadwaita, and also gained a 10 times performance boost when resizing its window. Bavarder, the AI chat app, will now let you have multiple windows at the same time, and they will warn you if a provider isn't working correctly. They also replaced Hugging Chat by their underlying model, Open Assistant. Imaginer, the AI image generator, now lets you set up a custom provider. iPlan, which is a new to-do list app, now supports grouping tasks in projects and lists. It lets you set up a timer for tasks, it has a global search to find things, and you can drag and drop tasks, projects, and lists to rearrange them. Fosh, the mobile shell, now has the ability to wake the display when receiving a notification, based on the category or the urgency of it. They also let users use the super key to open the overview when in docked mode. There's also a new HTTP-based API testing app called Escambo, which lets you specify endpoints, headers, and parameters to test your API requests. And there are 3 new GNOME extensions, one to hide specific devices from the Quick Settings audio panel, one to show events in the calendar as completed or upcoming, and one to automatically switch to Do Not Disturb when recording or when screen sharing. Lots of good stuff this week. It's always cool to see the GNOME app ecosystem in full swing. And let's finish this with the gaming news. First, it looks like there's some contradictory information about Roblox supporting Linux or not. Last week, I reported that a Roblox developer said they would not be supporting a native client, or the Windows client running with Wine. But now Roblox also said that while they do not have any plans for a native Linux client, they want to support Wine again. They say it looks possible and that they see a lot of value in it. And they also said they will never guarantee Wine will work for their client, but that they would like it to. Pretty weird back and forth on this topic, but honestly it makes sense now to support at least Wine or Proton. You've got 3 million Steam Deck owners, 3 million Linux gamers, on top of what already existed. Which means it would be stupid to just not try and service that market with very minimal effort. Wine 8.8 was released this week, with more work to support the PE executable format in the PostScript driver, and initial support for loading ARM64EC modules, which might mean more support for ARM CPUs in Wine in the future. They also fixed 18 bugs, including for games like Devil May Cry, Rise of Nations, or the Battle.net launcher. And finally, it looks like Valve is really trying to fix their new big picture mode on Nvidia GPUs, as the latest beta for the Steam desktop client has improvements for this. They say they fixed high DPI scaling on Nvidia, and that they enabled hardware acceleration for big picture mode for the same Nvidia GPUs, plus some fixes for performance, although they also say it can introduce some visual artifacts. And I tried this on my laptop with an RTX 3050 Ti, and initially after downloading the beta I didn't see any changes, but after a reboot, then yes, it absolutely is a lot smoother than it used to be. It's still not perfect, there's still a little bit of delay here and there when opening the menu or navigating, but it is definitely not as stuttery as it once was, which is really good. Really good, just like our sponsor. So if you're still here, you're very likely to be a Linux user, which means at some point you have been confronted with hardware-related problems on Linux, like stuff that does not support Linux. And to avoid this in your next purchase, you should definitely give a look to our sponsor, Tuxedo. They make laptops and desktops that run Linux out of the box, which means your Linux distribution will run on them no problems. They have a big range of devices that should suit every price point and every need. They're based in Germany, but they ship to most countries in the world, and all their devices are very customizable when you purchase them. And all their laptops are openable, repairable, and upgradable, including the battery, the SSD, the RAM, and sometimes the wireless card. So if you need a new computer and you plan to run Linux on it, don't buy a device made to run Windows. Click the link in the description below and get yourself a Tuxedo PC. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, or to write a comment. And if you didn't like it, tell me why in the comments as well, and, well, you can always click that dislike button. And if you really enjoyed the channel and you want to support it, there are plenty of links in the description below for that. LibraPay, Patreon, PayPal, YouTube memberships, YouTube things, you know how this works. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!